Welcome to this webinar brought to you by InSeed and YubiKey on securing your organizations with YubiKeys at scale. I'm Phil, Marketing Manager of InSeed, and I have a few housekeeping items to take you through before we pass you over to Alan and David, who will be taking you through the rest of the webinar. First thing to know is this webinar will be recorded and everyone will receive recordings of the webinar shortly after the webinar finishes. If you don't receive a recording, then get in touch with us and we'll send it through to you. This webinar will discuss what organizations need to create phishing-resistant users at scale, and it's based on knowledge gained from both InSeed and YubiKey working together with multiple customers, focused on operators and end users, and we'll cover PKI and FIDO passkeys. Attendees will be on mute during the webinar, but if you've got any questions, please click the questions button at the bottom right, and we'll take you through and answer those questions at the end of the webinar. The webinar is going to be by Alan Story, Chief Product Officer of InSeed, and David Maples, Principal Solutions Architect of YubiKey. And if I could let David now take you through the rest of the webinar.
But not quite yet. I'll start.
But not quite yet.
Hi there, welcome. So I'm Alan Story, Chief Product Officer of InSeed. Just want to set the scene with a couple of slides about who InSeed are, for some of you who don't know us, and then David will do the same about YubiKey before we get into the meat of the presentation. So InSeed, around 110 people, focused on cybersecurity company, focused on digital identities, strong authentication, credential management. We've been doing this for over 25 years, so we've got a lot of experience in this area. We have around 150 customers. Most of those customers are very large security conscious organizations, federal government, aviation, aerospace and defense, military, finance, etc. So large organizations with something to protect. Our platform has been used to deploy over 20 million credentials since it's been in existence, so there's a lot of experience there. And we have a commercial off-the-shelf product family. That product family is designed to help customers on their journey towards stronger authentication. So we start right down the bottom of what we call the authentication pyramid with passwords, with our password security management product. But really what we're talking about today is how do you get to that higher level of assurance? So we're going to be talking across the multi-factor authentication product, which covers and supports the FIDO passkeys, and also the credential management system, which covers deploying FIDO passkeys and PKI solutions on YubiKeys at scale. I'll hand over to David.
Thank you, Alan. Hey, I'm David Maples. I'm from YubiKey, probably a well-known global authentication leader. Our device, the YubiKey, has been deployed in organizations down to individuals up to the largest tech enterprises, where we have the YubiKey deployed in 19 of the 20 US tech giants in Silicon Valley. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. We have shipped YubiKeys to over 4,500 organizations looking to support themselves and their users with strong authentication. We have a proven solution here, with YubiKeys being reported to have up to 99.9% credential theft risk reduction by employing phishing-resistant authentication methods such as FIDO and PIV. And what's more, we have an edge when it comes to comparing against mobile apps, where help desks of these large organizations have reported up to a 92% reduction in help desk calls just by switching to the YubiKeys. We have sold over 22 million YubiKeys worldwide. Next slide, if you would. Our lineup is basically a pick what works for your organization. We have everything from the standard YubiKeys available in USB-A, USB-C, NFC, small form factors, or lightning adapted form factors for iPhones and other iOS devices. We have released the YubiKey Bio series, allowing you to secure your phishing-resistant credentials with a biometric fingerprint. For those in a regulatory space, such as the federal government, we offer the YubiKey FIPS series, allowing you to achieve compliance with federal regulations while still having strong authentication. Finally, we also offer a low profile form factor HSM, our YubiHSM, for people looking to secure server secrets and other information outside of the authentication space. So today, we'd like to set the stage. Previously, you may have attended our previous webinar where we discussed how to make phishing-resistant authentication available, how to deploy it from the organization level, how admins and IT professionals can deploy YubiKeys and Interseed together to make strong authentication available to their organization. Today, we're going to look at this from the other perspective, the end users and those operators who actually issue devices to user. Really, when we look at it, phishing-resistant authentication, phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication, has been around for quite some time. PIV, or otherwise known as smart cards, also used in the government CAC cards, has been around for quite a few years, and people have used it extensively. FIDO and FIDO passkeys have been raised to the limelight in the past year and have been proven to provide strong, easy-to-use, and phishing-resistant authentication. YubiKey and Interseed have partnered together with these technologies to help drive them further, making them easier to deploy, easier to manage, and easier to use. In this webinar, we're going to talk about how we can take these solutions to everyday people, the users, the operators, the people who are literally be the first line of your organization because they're the ones actually doing the work, and how to make them transition from people who have access to phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication to phishing-resistant users. So, what do we mean by phishing-resistant users? As I mentioned previously, phishing-resistant authentication has been known, has been deployed, and has been proven. But the trick to actually making it come to its full fruition is to get users empowered and excited and see the benefit of using phishing-resistant authentication beyond just the security. We need to be, our goal is to show you how you can use phishing-resistant authentication with YubiKey and Interseed to secure services across platforms, across devices, and across business scenarios. And not only that, but make your end users excited and happy and empowered and make them better because of using it. Alan, would you like to cover the next slide?
Yeah, so how we've put this together is really, David and I have gone through what are our customers asking for. We've been deploying solutions for a number of years now. A number of our customers have deployed PKI-based solutions on the YubiKeys. They're now looking at how do I bring FIDO passkeys in on the same devices? How do I get that level of control? Because they want to expand that strong authentication to wider user groups and wider devices. So we've really pulled this together based on what have our customers been asking us, what's important to our customers. We think this is a good place to start to look at how do we create those phishing-resistant users. So starting from the user perspective, what does a user want here? First thing they want is something that's easy to use. They don't want anything that's going to make their life harder. Make it simple for them, make it easy for them, and they will use it. So that's the first piece. The second one is, I want something that works across all my devices. If I can log onto my laptop with a device, but then I go and try and use the same thing from my phone and it doesn't work and I can't authenticate, I've got a poor user experience. So the real world today is we're all using a mix of on-premise and cloud. We're using a mix of laptops, desktops, and mobile devices. So we have to respect that, support that. Third thing is, if I have to do anything for myself, if I'm expected to do any self-service, I need to create any updates or unlock anything, I'm not an IT expert. Make it as simple as I possibly can. And finally, I want to be a good corporate citizen. I don't want my organization to get hacked. I don't want us on the front page of CNN being the victim of a data breach and ransomware. That's not good for me as an individual. So how can we make that person's life easier? How can we help them become a phishing-resistant user? So the first one is the device itself, and I'll let David talk through this one.
So yeah, the YubiKey from its initial conception was the concept of it needs to be easy to use. No external buttons that are unnecessary, no extra steps to jump through, easy to use, easy to carry, robust. So you can put it on your keychains, you can put it in your pockets, you can take it in a job site or in your office and make sure that you don't have to worry about dropping it from the desk will cause it to stop working. It needs to be simple to use with a single touch to perform strong authentication instead of having to jump through additional hoops, provide additional information that's unnecessary, or otherwise add a level of friction to actually perform strong authentication. It needs to, however, be secure. Just like your bank card, you can't give it out without a PIN, so nobody can just take your wallet and gain access to your accounts. The YubiKey credentials are also secured with a PIN, preventing somebody from maliciously just taking your keychain, taking your YubiKey, and impersonating you. We've heard a lot of requests and interest in biometric support, so our latest devices are biometric capable, while still remaining all of the benefits of being robust, easy to carry, resistant to damage, resistant to water, and can otherwise be used alongside your standard YubiKeys while still offering strong biometric biometric support. And finally, we want to have it being simple. We don't want users to have to carry multiple devices for each account they need, for each type of credential they need. Everything resides on a single device. A single YubiKey, along with a service like Interseed providing the issuance, can hold all of your passkeys alongside all your PIV credentials and perform strong phishing-resistant authentication in a single touch.
So let's have a look about what that end user experience is. What does easy look like? So here we have a YubiKey device. We're going to look at a Windows logon experience. So this may have historically been done with a password. Now we're starting to give the user a different experience. So we can see the YubiKey device inserted in the side of the machine. They've entered their PIN, they touch the device, and they're logged in. That's it. Simple as that. So all the user has to do is remember a very, very simple PIN. There's nothing complex for them to remember, nothing complex for them to change. So it's a very, very simple experience, very limited training that, if any, needed to actually get that out and deploy it. But we log on to more than Windows. So logging onto a SaaS solution here. So that was with PKI. This is with a FIDO passkey, but it's on the same physical device. So I don't have to use a different device at this point. This particular one happens to be using our own authentication server, but you can issue FIDO passkeys with a credential management system and pass them into a third-party identity provider, such as Entra ID. So this example, we're providing a username. We support usernameless, so you can literally just completely replace the username and the password with the device and the PIN. And again, very simple experience here. I'm inserting my device. If it's already in, no problem. I'm entering a PIN. I'm putting my finger on the device just to make sure there's a human physically present at that point. So what we're seeing here is starting to get a common authentication experience across multiple systems. So my logon to Windows is the same experience as my logon to a SaaS application. And that starts to bring real benefits to the users because it's that simple experience regardless of what I'm accessing.
Not just a simple experience, but a uniform experience. Since the PIN that was provided is unique to the YubiKey hardware itself, not the service that you're logging into, the same PIN will unlock both your PIV function as well as your FIDO function without breaking security, since it is never used to authenticate outside of the hardware itself. This reduces so much friction as users no longer have to keep a separate password for each service, for each function, for each device. And because it is local to the device itself and provides no benefit if the hardware remains in a secure location in the user's control, it doesn't have to be rotated or be as complex as passwords. We all have had our own headaches on how we have to rotate passwords monthly, how they have to be 12-character longs with special characters, and all sorts of complexity that makes it really hard for users to keep track of and really tempts users to take shortcuts which reduce their security. With YubiKey, with Interseed, with FIDO2 and PIV, everything becomes super simple, super easy to use, and more secure. And it's not just us saying that. Next slide, if you would, please. Our users have come forth and told us directly how easy the YubiKey experience is, how their users who have been trained for years, having to enter a password, having to cycle the password every month, having to have long, complex passwords, they come in, they plug their YubiKey into their station, they touch their button, and away they go. They can launch apps, they can log in, and they don't need to have to worry about entering a password every 5 seconds to prove that they are who they say they are. They touch the YubiKey and away they go. If the machine is restarted, it's locked, they plug their YubiKey back in and away they go. It's simple, it's productive, and it's easy, and users like using it because it is easy.
Okay.
So from the YubiKey's perspective, the big thing is we want to make sure that we have support across every device and every operating system we can. We accomplish this in 2 ways. First, multiple form factors for connectors, both USB-A and USB-C, as well as NFC for remote devices. That's combined with having everything, multiple protocols on a single hardware device, so you don't need to cycle between them. Having the 2 together make it really, really powerful. Alan has shown you the desktop environment, but the mobile device environment, your mobile phone, is just as easy.
Okay, so let's take a look at that. So we've looked at the desktop logon with PKI. We've looked at a SaaS application we've logged onto with Fido. One of the challenges with PKI is it's hard to get it to work on a mobile phone. It just doesn't have the capability to share itself simply on that phone. And that's where Fido really comes in. Fido passkeys come in because it's built into the operating systems, it's built into the browsers. So it's straightforward to actually use it. So this example, I'm going to log on to the same application I did earlier with my Fido passkey on my YubiKey device, but I'm doing it straight from my phone. So I'm logging into, in this example, Salesforce, just as I did before. Again, I'm using our own authentication server, but this could be anything at this point that we're actually using. So now what I need to do is simply hold my YubiKey to the back of the device, and with NFC, with the Fido protocol, I can strongly authenticate. So very simple user experience, but importantly, it works across a wide range of devices I own. I can use it on my desktop, use it on my laptop, use it on my mobile device. If I'm looking at self-service, so sometimes I may need to do something on my device. For example, if I'm using PKI on my YubiKey will last for a very long time. The certificate may be issued for a year or 3 years. It may well expire within that particular time, and I need a new one. It may be I need to issue an additional Fido passkey onto my existing device. So this is where the credential management system, MyDCMS, comes in. What it allows you to do is to create updates centrally that can then be self-collected with a very simple user experience. So here, the system will tell you if you have something to collect. Hey, Alan, your certificate's expiring. Do you want to collect your new one now? Yes. And then it walks you through a very simple update experience. Lots of ways a user can authenticate for that. If you already have the device and it's valid and you have the PIN for it, you can simply use that to authenticate into the system and then collect your update.
Yeah, and the best part is, since the YubiKey is separate from whatever endpoint you're authenticating in, may be a laptop, desktop, or mobile device, you can update and keep your credentials on your user as you cycle through devices. The lifetime of a laptop in most enterprises is about 3 years from issuance to retirement. But a credential, your YubiKey, can last much, much longer. And that's why it's so powerful having both the Interseed solution to manage and keep your credentials up to date and a YubiKey for your users so they have that continuity between devices. And that actually leads to the next point that we'd like to talk about. Users don't want to be the problem. As Alan mentioned, they don't want to be the ones who create those headlines on CNN. X Corp has been hacked by malicious agencies, tons of data breaches, all that stuff. Nobody wants to be the ones who had the root cause of that. But they want it to be easy. And between the two, the key point of making users into phishing-resistant users is making phishing-resistant authentication easy, as we've shown you. having it being easy to manage credentials on devices, having one device, not multiple ones that you have to juggle to keep yourself secure. No more password changes, no more password resets. If your database gets hacked and you have your passwords exposed, everyone has to struggle to change. If everything's local to your devices, it doesn't matter because it's all local. Nobody else knows it. And really, at the end of the day, phishing attacks are getting more and more complex. They're the low-hanging fruit for hackers. They're the easiest way for them to gain access to data that they actually want. It's not enough to offer multi-factor authentication that is phishing resistant to users. It's making them excited to use it. It's making them want to use it. It's making them want to not try and find a way around it, not open up any backdoors or other breaches just in the name of ease of use. It's to make them want to use it everywhere because it is easier for them, because it is more secure for them, and every person wants that.
Yeah, one particular statistic I bring out here is that regardless of how much training people do on helping users try to spot phishing attacks, and I would absolutely recommend you do that, because the statistics do show that when you do that, the percentages of people clicking through comes down. But looking across industries, you're still ending up with sort of between 5 and 10%, even after the training, of people clicking through those phishing attacks. And that's because they're getting so much more sophisticated with the advent of AI, generating ones that are virtually indistinguishable. And it only takes one click to somebody to install something, and suddenly you've got ransomware on the system. So going for phishing resistant users is absolutely the way forward. So that's the end user requirement, and most of it, to be honest, is about making it simple and making it easy. If it's simple for the end user, if it works across all their devices, they've got a common authentication experience, regardless of whether it's desktop logon or SaaS or from their phone, they will use it because it makes their life easier. The next group of people we're going to look at is the operators. So these are the individuals in the organization whose job it is to issue the YubiKeys to people, to manage them, to make sure people get the right ones. They need to know what's out there and help the users. So the first thing they want is something that's easy to deploy. How do I physically get this piece of hardware into the hands of the individual I want to be using it, get the credentials on it, and get them up and running? The second one is visibility. I need to know what's out there. I need to know what's happening in my organization, not just what YubiKeys are out there, but potentially with inventory control, where have they been issued? Am I running out of stock? Who's got what device, etc. Users will have problems. The good news is that with devices and a simple PIN or a fingerprint, you tend to get far fewer support calls than you do for passwords or password resets. So that problem is smaller, but still people lose devices or have problems sometimes. So it's important you have the tools in place to help those users, give them that ongoing good experience. And then finally, the last two are links, so audit and reporting. So I might need to investigate something. What happened? Who issued this device? Has there been a problem with it? And I need to get access to information in the system for reporting, management information reports. How many devices am I issuing? How many people are unlocking them? Is there a problem in a particular area? So the more information you have, the more visibility you have, the better job you can do as an operator to keep your users happy and have a good experience. So deployment, there's a number of steps. I'll hand over to David at the next slide. So the first one here is, how do I actually get the devices out to people? So this is the physical delivery of the device. There's a number of options there, but at that point, typically it doesn't have credentials on it. You're just physically delivering the hardware. There are a number of ways we can issue credentials to people, ranging from self-service to operator-led. The majority of our customers, for the very first time a device is issued, do that face-to-face, because that's part of that user onboarding process, introducing them in, going through the HR processes, etc. So that's the most common approach there. Then using the software, credential management software, to track and manage those credentials. Who's got what? Where is it? Which credentials are on which device issued to which person, etc. And start to use self-service for updates to that. So for example, if you need to push updates out to a device to put new keys on a device, or issue new certificates, or recover them to a different device, then allowing the users to do that in a simple way but securely tends to be the way most of our customers go, because it brings them the most benefits.
Yeah, and from YubiKey, we've invested a lot of time and effort into making YubiKeys easy to get into the hands of end users. As mentioned before, they're durable, they're rugged, they can be sent in the mail if necessary in a blank state, so even if they're intercepted, nothing gets exposed, but they're durable enough that they can go through first-class mail and come out perfectly fine at the other end. But that might not be sufficient for some people. We always have the option for people to purchase YubiKeys directly, but a lot of organizations are finding that they'd much rather hand as much logistics off to another party as possible. This is where YubiKey's offerings of YubiKey as a service comes in. This was previously known as YubiKey Enterprise Service. And basically, it's where we allow users to purchase YubiKeys directly from YubiKey, and YubiKey ships those to the end users. It can be to individuals in remote locations, urban locations, locations where they don't have easy access to an office to come in. It may be shipping large orders to branch offices so that they can be deployed internally. But essentially, it's simple, it's seamless, it can be built into your ServiceNow or other workflows, and allows your organization to handle YubiKeys much the way that they'd handle software licenses or shipping laptops or other devices to users, and make it simple, seamless, and secure.
So let's look at some deployment models. The first one here is face-to-face. So this is the typical situation in many of our customers where they've had a new employee join the organization, and as part of their onboarding process, they give them their laptop, they give them their mobile phone, they give them their YubiKey, and they put credentials on that YubiKey at that point so they can get up and running immediately. So this is a simple example where we're picking a user from a directory. There's a job to be issued in the system, being authorized. That could be by an HR person, for example, and now we're actually go ahead and issue it. So the first thing we're going to do is insert the YubiKey in the system. You'll see there's an unsupported card. That in there is just to demonstrate the fact that you can lock your system down to only issuing the types of devices you trust. Put a new device in, it checks if it's already issued to somebody else. It isn't. And then we start to communicate with the device. So there's a lot going on under the hood here. The first thing we do is we check it's the right type of device that we're allowed to issue, and we create a secure channel to that device. So one of the benefits of the YubiKey device when we're working with it in a PKI certificates world is that it follows the PIV standard. The PIV standard means that we can communicate from the credential management system directly to the device over a secure channel. So we don't have to have any middleware on the device to personalize the device. We communicate directly with it. We do that over a secure channel, an encrypted channel. We can swap the keys out from factory keys to customer keys at the point of issuance. So even if somebody else finds your device, they're not going to be able to do anything with it. They're not going to be able to access it. So it's more secure. It's also faster because we're not going through that software middleware. We're going directly to the device. Then we're generating private public keys on the device. We're taking the public keys off. We're sending them to a certificate authority. We're acting as a combined device and registration authority there. We're writing the certificates back down to the device. That may be signing, authentication certificates. It could be encryption certificates that have been archived that we want to read secure emails with. So we take care of all of that under the hood using the security features that are built into the YubiKey, and we then issue that device. There's a huge amount more we can do at that point in terms of configuring the data on the YubiKey. The YubiKey is a great SDK available there to allow us to set certain parameters on the device, things like PIN policy, is touch to sign enabled, which particular features of the YubiKey are enabled. So you can in effect personalize that YubiKey to your organization at the point of issuance.
And the key thing is, to the user and the operator, all this is automated. They don't have to set these options. They don't have to, as Alan mentioned, install middleware. They don't have to flip switches inside their application to make this happen. It's all part of a well-defined process, allowing scalability, uniformity, and security. You don't have to train every operator in how to issue a credential. All you have to do is, as Alan showed you, walk them through clicking a user from a directory, and the Interseed and YubiKey solution does the rest.
Yeah, so a key part here is policy control. The organization setting their own policy, who's allowed to issue what to whom, what are the rules around it. If you're more interested in that, then please search out our previous webinar, Deploying YubiKeys at Scale, where we talked about the role of the administrator and the security policy. So that was a PKI example, but there are many, many ways to get devices out. Not everybody does a face-to-face issuance. So for example here, we're going to show you demonstrating a self-service enrollment, and this is using the YubiKey Bio device. So this is the device that David talked about that has a built-in fingerprint sensor and reader. So you can use that as a PIN replacement. It's not just touching it to make sure a person's present, you're making sure that the right person's present. Some people see that as a security benefit, some people see it as a usability benefit. From my perspective, it's actually both. So this is an example enrolling the YubiKey device from our MFA product, and we're actually going to take the person through enrolling that biometric. So this happens directly from the desktop. We're going to let that person register a new security key. So this is within our MFA solution. So they can create a PIN for the device. This is a brand new device at this point. Always worth having the PIN as a fallback, just in case you get problems with your finger. 99% of the time, finger just works great. So now we're actually walking that end user through registering a fingerprint on that device, which in this case is protecting the FIDO portion of the YubiKey. So again, simple process. The user doesn't need to be an expert to do this. If you can get 99% of your users to do this by self-service, then you're reducing the help desk cost to get these deployed. So that's it. Very simple for the end user. Directly from their desktop, they can register their new YubiKey device in the MFA solution. They can set a PIN. They can capture that fingerprint, and that's now written down to that device. So when they use that for authentication, all they need to do is put their device in and put their fingerprint on the device.
And since the fingerprint is on the YubiKey itself, if someone was to take that YubiKey Bio and connect it to another laptop or connect it to their mobile phone, the biometric, the fingerprint, is on the YubiKey and it follows with them. So you have that same strong security regardless of what endpoint you're trying to log in to.
Yep. Works very well in environments where you've got shared devices, where people want to bring their credential with them and use that across multiple devices. Another example here is some of our customers, US federal government, want to issue credentials compliant with US federal government policy around mobile devices. So derived PIV credentials, SP 800-157. So we've been working with those for a long time on mobile phones. A number of those customers now are looking at, how do I do this for FIDO passkeys? I want to issue FIDO passkeys in my environment, but I've already issued a smart card. I already have a PIV card issued in my environment. That's bound back to the person's identity. I don't want the person to have to come back into the office to see an operator to collect their FIDO device. I want them to have a FIDO device because I can use it across mobile and use it across multiple applications. But I want to do that in a way that's compliant with the government rules. So we have two ways of doing this. We have a zero footprint kiosk. So that's just a browser. You don't have to deploy anything to do this at all. If you want higher assurance, we also have a client that can be deployed which supports biometrics. So the process here is the individual is going to authenticate with their PIV card. They're then going to self-collect the YubiKey device, compliant with policy, and all of that will be registered within the CMS. So here, they're inserting their card. They're going to choose a certificate. So this is authenticating themselves with a PIV card. This does all of the full SP 800-157 background checks, checks the 7-day checks. There's APIs to push data in if it's revoked. So it's fully compliant. So they're authenticating with their existing credential, which, because it's a PIV credential, is bound back to the individual. Now they can collect their FIDO credential. So at this point, this could be a new device. It could be an existing device. In this case, it's an existing device. So we're authenticating with the PIN that's already set up on the device. Now we're going to register this within the MyID CMS. So that public key will be registered within the MyID CMS. At that point, the CMS itself can act as an authentication server, or we can pass that through to third-party identity providers, such as Entra ID, which are the recent announcements some of you may have seen there, with Microsoft opening up APIs to allow third parties to provide the issuance and credential management around FIDO passkeys, but then pass them into Enter ID so it can act as the identity provider. So the combination here is we can issue PKI credentials to the YubiKey, which will work with Enter ID. We can now issue passkeys to the YubiKey device, which will also work with Enter ID. And that's at that very highest level of assurance. So that's a device-bound passkey. It can't leave the device. It can't be stolen by anybody else. And we're then onto visibility. So starting to look at who has which devices out there. Part of the job of a credential management system is to keep track of things. Which certificates are on which YubiKey, which were issued to which person, on which date, in which location, by which individual. So that's all available then for inquiries and reporting. Which person has FIDO passkeys issued to them? What type of device are they on? So this is just a simple report, online inquiry in the system. So you can find a person, you can then look at the devices that person has. So here, for example, we've seen that this person has a number of YubiKeys. They also have a mobile credential that's been issued and managed from the system. You can then click on an individual one and you can start to look at details within it. So this concept of linking objects together. I've got a person, what devices do they have? What's on that particular device? That device has certificates on, show me the certificates. You can then drill down into the individual certificates. So it makes it very easy for operators to find out what's actually out there and what's deployed. If a user has a problem, if they can't authenticate for some reason, they generally don't talk about my certificate's not working. They phone up and say, I can't log in, and they'll give you their name. So the help desk has the ability to find the person, find the devices, find the certificates, look at the history of what's happened there. So it makes it very, very easy for them to find out what's deployed and help that end user.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. One of the biggest pushbacks against having a phishing resistant authentication solution on endpoints is the user doesn't always know which credentials they have on which machine. Their mobile device might have a different set of credentials than their laptop for just operational security, and they will get frustrated when they can't access these same resources on both environments. Having everything on a YubiKey that can transfer between the two devices, that's tracked by the CMS, allows them to have a uniform experience across all of their endpoints, allowing them to not just be more productive, but reduce that help desk cost, make them more likely to use that strong phishing resistant authentication, and make them excited to be a phishing resistant user.
And it's important that we support those users throughout the entire life cycle. So we've spoken a little bit about delivery. There's many, many ways to deliver the devices for people. We have some people face-to-face, some people doing it centrally, some people with self-collection. So we've got those capabilities in there to deliver, collect from a manager, collect from an IT office, for example. We've then got activation, so that's personalizing the device, adding the credentials to it. Lots of ways for the user to authenticate into the system at that point. Credential management system, our system is not about telling the operators how to do things. It's about letting the organization define the policy and then giving very, very simple processes to those operators and end users. But there's many ways you can define that policy. So you could allow somebody to authenticate in with an existing Entra ID, for example, with an existing external authenticator, such as a Google Authenticator, with their smart card, if they already have one deployed. Some people don't. So you could allow them to authenticate in with a Windows authentication. We could possibly give them a one-time activation code. So this is really all about having systems that fit around your business processes. Once the card's out there, the device is out there in the hands of the individual, things may happen. They may forget their PIN at some point. If they've been on leave for a long period of time, they may come back and forget it. Happens far, far fewer than you would get problems with passwords and password resets. But it happens on a very small number of occasions. So it's important that the system has the ability to reset that PIN for the individual. One thing about the PIV standard is out the box, it doesn't have an offline reset. It only has an online reset as part of the specification. So if I'm connected to the credential management system, I can unlock my credential. there's a set of policies and rules about that which we fully support. But out the box, the PIV standard doesn't have offline unlock. The good news is that with InSeed and YubiKey working together, we have a solution to that. So we have a credential provider that runs pre-Windows logon that allows you to an offline unlock. So in the worst case scenario where somebody is in a hotel room, they can't get internet access, but they still need to be able to log onto the device, but they've locked it, we can still assist them. So there you can phone the help desk up, we go through a challenge response mechanism and we unlock it. So that's an example, I'd say, of one of the advanced features we have with the level of integration we've been working with the YubiKey for years there. Replacement, people lose the device, they might need a replacement. Again, the ability to do that with self-service, depending where they are. Do we ship a new device out to them? They can collect it. They can get new signing and authentication credentials on there. We can recover their encryption keys and get those back on there. So again, processes around that. I mentioned earlier updates and renewals. So there are a number of things you may need to update on a device once it's out there in the field, in the end user's hands. You might want to change the settings on the device. You might want to put new certificates on it. It may be it was originally only used for PKI, but now you want to use it for FIDO as well. So you want to enable that on the device while it's out in the field. And that simple self-service update I showed earlier, where the system will tell you there's something you need to do and walk you through the process. That covers that. So that will deal with updates onto the token, onto the YubiKey, in addition to certificate data. And then revocation, somebody leaves the organization. It's important that the second where they walk out the door, they can't get back onto any systems. Hopefully they've been a good corporate citizen and handed their YubiKey back to you. But if they haven't, then the ability to revoke that immediately is very important. That can be done by operators directly. It can be picked up from Active Directory. So if the account is revoked there, we will automatically revoke all the credentials on that and all devices that person holds. For a number of our larger organizations, that's part of an orchestrated identity and access management solution. So we will receive a signal from an API from something like SailPoint or ServiceNow, for example. And again, we'll then revoke all of that. So these are very important features to have in a system if you're looking at deploying YubiKeys at scale, not just deployment, but the real world issues that happen with human beings.
Yeah, and from the user's perspective, they get their YubiKey on day one along with their first laptop. And then however many years later, when they move on to a new opportunity, they turn their YubiKey, that same YubiKey in. And that is the amount of friction they have in this life cycle. Everything else is handled under the hood. Everything else is automated. They don't need to worry about firmware updates. They don't need to worry about security patches. They don't have any sort of additional headaches just to manage the device and still have strong authentication, which again makes them it's easy to use and makes users eager to use it.
So just one example of that. So this is an unlocked. This is a self-service unlock. This is the PKI credential on the YubiKey device. So again, this is the end user wanting to unlock their credential so they can insert the device. There are multiple ways we can authenticate the person at this point. So they could use an external identity such as Entra ID or Google Authenticator. They could use a one-time code that's been sent to them. Specifically, all that will allow them to do is to unlock this device. They could use integrated Windows authentication. We can have operator-assisted ways of doing it. So the key message here is that the rules and the policy around unlocking devices are very much up to the organization. Those are set by the administrators. And from that point, the end users are just presented with the simple options that they're allowed to do. But we have all the capabilities there to make sure that the devices are kept up and running should you decide to change anything or should the worst case happen and somebody lock their device. Just looking at audit slightly, so everything that happens within the CMS is audited in a central signed audit trail, who issued what to whom, so you can start to look at not just what's on a device, but what's happened to that device. You may decide to use a device across multiple people, so you may use it for somebody, they could leave the organization, you could recycle that and issue it to somebody else. We can make sure that that's tracked within the system, so we know which devices are out there, what's happened to them, when were they updated, when were they issued, when were they unlocked. So all of that information is available via audit inquiries, very flexible. You can also get that information out in reports. This data is also available by APIs, so a number of our customers put this into dashboards using things like Power BI to start sort of spotting trends, or if there's a suspicious number of unlocks within a particular location, that will all get picked up, sent through to SIEM systems, for example. So here, for example, we can see an example of a report where you're looking for particular devices. You can see that we've got a number of YubiKeys out there deployed. Some of them are enabled and deployed to a particular other user. Others are actually sat in stock, ready for deployment. And if you've got inventory control switched on, it will tell you where those devices physically are as well.
Yeah, and from the YubiKeys perspective, it's a purpose-built security device. No data gets on or off it that can expose the credentials loaded on it outside of the very specific issuance flow for a approved CMS Interseed. This way you don't have to worry that the credentials that you've loaded on your device have been extracted and are in the wild. You know that if you have a strong assurance that if you know where the physical device is, you know where those credentials reside.
Okay.
So really, when you're looking at this, seems like there's a lot of daunting tasks to move to phishing resistant users, to convert your users to be eager and excited to be using phishing resistant authentication. But it's really not as hard as it's made out to be. You can start with the easiest solutions. There's already a ton of apps that everybody uses that have some sort of multi-factor support. You can start with them. Between YubiKey and Interseed, most, if not all, of the solutions in use today have some sort of integration that can be done out of the box. As we mentioned, using phishing-resistant authentication makes your users' lives easier. Remove the headache and hassle of passwords. Remove the issue with having a corporate cell phone that you have to keep updated and manage. Make it simple. Plug, touch, go. Tap, go. And away your users go for authentication that they don't have to worry about because it's all managed by your solution, by your Interseed CMS, by your YubiKey. And finally, it doesn't matter how easy it is if you can't scale. And this is where Interseed and YubiKey has put a lot of effort to make the solutions that we've presented you today something that can take scale from a small group to an entire enterprise spanning organization. And this is something that both of our organizations, both of our companies have seen our solutions transition to being used widely, if not ubiquitously, not across all users in a particular organization or enterprise.
Yeah, and that's the key point I'd probably bring here is this. So Interseed have a lot of experience working with multiple customers, which we've learned from those multiple customers on how do they actually get these credentials out at scale. That could be 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Our largest deployments in the several hundreds of thousands volumes. So we've got a lot of experience at looking at how have customers actually done that, how have they solved some of those problems. And we're more than happy to share that, talking about the life cycle, the processes. It really comes down to if you can get the software and the hardware to meet your desired business processes and not have to change your business processes to meet the software, we're in a good place. So we've got a lot of experience working with that. Happy to share that. Okay, so hopefully you found that webinar useful. As I mentioned, there is a previous one in this series that was focused on the security officer and the administrator one. We'll share a link out to that as we share this webinar. This one was very much focused on how do we give the operators and end users a good experience so they want to adopt the strong authentication and become a phishing resistant user. So at this point, I'll hand over to Phil and see if we have any questions.
Yeah, we have quite a few questions to go through. So I'll start with the first one for David. With YubiKey 5.7 firmware, will Microsoft Entra ID be able to register the key serial number?
Helps if I unmute myself. We are working very closely with Microsoft Entra to add support for the functionality to allow it to register a serial number on issuance. This is part of a FIDO function called Enterprise Attestation, which is a conversation in and of itself that we'd love to have with you, but it's outside the scope of this particular webinar. Microsoft is very interested in the ability to pull a serial number off a YubiKey in a FIDO interaction, but doing so in a manner that preserves privacy and security for the user as they use it in other locations and can opt in rather than be forced to. This is a developing technology, and again, YubiKey is leading the ecosystem here in providing the hardware foundation to enable this, and Microsoft is an eager and active participant in integrating this functionality into their Entra solution. So soon.
Yeah, and it's an interesting conversation because we're very much playing in that space as well as looking at how and when do we add enterprise attestation in, what are the use cases that need addressing there. And it's part of a slightly broader conversation around zero trust as well. So when we're, for example, issuing a FIDO passkey and passing that into Entra ID for consumption, is there more than just serial number we need to pass in? Do we need to pass in the identity assurance level, the authentication issuance assurance level? So how do we share those secure signals between multiple platforms? So I completely agree, probably another webinar in its own right just on that topic.
Right, next question is probably for both of you. Is it possible to manage the FIDO credentials on a YubiKey when these credentials are being used for the modern authentication sign-in (brackets Entra) options to log on to a Windows 11 device?
Actually, this is one of the most exciting things that YubiKey, Interseed, and Microsoft have done together, allowing for the management of Entra credentials to go through the Interseed CMS on a YubiKey. Alan, you probably have a lot more in-depth knowledge about this.
Happy to. So the challenge originally was that we could issue and manage the FIDO passkeys on the YubiKey device to a high level of assurance. We could check it's the right device, it's the right firmware. We could enable all the information on there. For example, are the client keys discoverable? Are we enforcing user presence at the point of use? So everything to get to the very high levels of assurance up to authentication assurance level 3. But then you couldn't actually use them with Entra ID. So you had to issue them with Entra ID, but Entra ID is not a credential management system. Yes, it can issue the device, but you won't get all that policy control. We also had other users who wanted to issue PKI and FIDO passkeys to the same device, and they wanted one system to track all that. So the good news is that the answer is yes, we can now do this. So in public preview at the moment from Microsoft, and very soon to be available from Interseed, is the ability to actually issue and manage those passkeys and pass them in to Entra ID so that it can actually act as the identity provider and use them. And that follows through into credential management and lifecycle management, such as revocation. I am sure we'll be running a webinar to demonstrate that very soon, so please look out for that.
Okay, next one. Is it possible to set and enforce a PIN policy, like at least 8 characters? Is it possible to block easily guessable pins, patterns, or a custom block list with MyID and YubiKeys?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, we can set PIN policy, absolutely.
Next one is, how can a small company, 12 people, implement and have a smooth onboarding with MFA with YubiKeys? Probably Alan to respond to this one.
Yeah, so what we're seeing is kind of patterns around the size of organization. So if you're a very large organization, you're probably using something like an Entra ID or an Octavia identity provider, and you don't want to move away from that. So there we can act as a credential management system where we are issuing the PKI credentials and the FIDO passkeys, but passing them in to that identity provider that then uses them at the point of authentication. More of a medium-sized customer who hasn't invested in full Entra ID because it's potentially complex and expensive, they're then looking for a multi-factor authentication product, which we have, and that again fully supports the YubiKey devices. So you can issue and manage them within that product to be able to use them for authentication. And that connects into your existing environments with standard protocols such as SAML, OpenID Connect, so it's straightforward to deploy. Once we get down to the very small size customer, then what we're starting to see is partners pick up the solution and embed it into their managed service and managed service security provider offerings. So depending on the level of skills you have within the organization, you can either deploy your own MFA, you can work with Entra, or you could look to a security service provider who's starting to bake these capabilities in.
From the YubiKeys perspective, we offer all of the devices that have been shown previously directly from our web store to be purchasable in any quantity that meets your needs, and they do ship worldwide. So it is, if you have only a dozen people, you can purchase as many YubiKeys as you need without having to go through a sales rep, just off our website, off Amazon, or off one of our global resellers if you need something local to your country. Again, it's purchasing, they're the same devices that you get purchasing directly from a salesperson. We don't have extensive price hikes for purchasing through our web store. It's the same structure. And really, it's all about getting the devices in your hands in the way that meets your needs.
Okey-doke. Thanks for that, David. Next question is on credential management for YubiKeys. Is your management solution keeping the serial number of a YubiKey, and can we do a PGP key management with that if we use PGP keys from YubiKeys for secure CRT SSH clients?
So for PKI, yes, we do keep the serial number. For FIDO passkeys, we do not keep the serial number yet. That's the enterprise attestation piece that David was talking about. So that's very much at the early adopter stage of the industry. Nobody is making use of that today. We're engaged with our customers, talking to them, looking at what are the potential use cases. Just last week, David and myself were doing a conversation with a number of people in US government around this, looking at what are the use cases, what are the requirements. So it will come, but we're very much looking at the use cases, and PGP is not something that the CMS manages.
That being said, a YubiKey that's managed by the Interseed CMS still allows for access to the PGP function of it through the PGP client software. So nothing in the situation we described now will lock you out of that particular use case.
Next question. Will there be a requirement if or whether the certificate can be issued from a public or a private CA?
We support both. So we have some customers who actually issue logon certificates from their own CA and external certificates for publicly trusted signing onto the same device from the same CMS. No problem at all.
Next one is, can multiple users use a single security key for authentication? No.
It is possible, but not recommended. The problem, of course, being that in many cases, unless that device is tied to a specific endpoint, it does not allow for security between each individual user. That being said, we have seen multiple situations, multiple environments, particularly in manufacturing, where there's a single endpoint on a production floor that multiple people need to access, that they use the YubiKey to perform strong authentication on.
What you can do is have multiple identities relating to the same person on the same device. So, for example, we have some customers who have a normal user certificate on there and an administrator, one or many administrator certificates for accessing remote service, for example. So that's certainly achievable out of the box. But I agree with David, it would be unusual for us to have multiple people sharing the same physical device. Not impossible, but unusual.
Definitely like to have a conversation around it.
Yep.
Okay. Next question. Is there a combined self-service flow that issues both PIG component and a FIDO2 passkey with one PIN, including prior Entra ID authentication?
Not yet. So today, What we typically do is issue the PKI credential at the point of issuance, binding it to the person so we know that what device is with that person. And then the FIDO credential is typically collected by self-service afterward. That again binds back into that enterprise attestation question, because one of the things enterprise attestation would give us is the ability to know that both of those credentials are on the same device, which we don't have without it. So the safest to say is it's a roadmap item. Watch this space.
Right, David, there's a question here for you. Why is only the YubiKey 5 FIPS tokens advertised as AAL3? In addition, on the FIDO Alliance certified authenticators, they're only listed as certified level 2 authenticators. Are YubiKeys not secured against physical attacks required for level 3?
All right, I will take this in two parts. First, to achieve AAL3 in the federal space, a device needs to be essentially have gone through the FIPS 104-2 or 104-3 certification, which defines explicitly both the hardware and firmware on the device that's holding the credentials. In order to achieve that, we say that our FIPS YubiKeys, which have gone through this process and have that certification with the known firmware, with the known hardware, are the only ones that can achieve AAL level 3 with 100% assurance. We don't want to oversell our devices to do something that they would get a customer in trouble with. So we really want to be good citizens here. As far as the FIDO Alliance, we do have the hardware security to achieve level 3. One of the process is that FIDO authentication level 3, the process for getting that has been vaguely defined up until quite recently. We want to make sure that when we achieve AL3, we can explicitly show exactly the benefit to the user on why that is what they're actually getting for purchasing a device that has that level of certification. We, again, don't want users to get a false impression that they're getting a better solution, a more secure solution, when it might not actually be as dramatic as entities would like you to believe.
Right, next question. Is it possible to use Entra ID as an IDP to log into MyID desktop operator and website?
Yes. So what we've been doing is within the CMS, it depends on the specific interface you're using, but within the CMS, we've been extending it to support federation, as we've had a number of customer requests of wanting people to access it either as an operator or via self-service with an external federation. But yes.
Okay, and that's all the questions we have at the moment.
Okay, so hope you found that useful. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your questions.
Thank you very much.